Bomarzo is a small medieval town situated on the summit of a hill 100 kilometers from Rome. Prince Vicini Orsini built himself a garden that he named the Sacred Wood in a woody valley opposite the town. It was the year 1552. While political and religious wars continued in Europe, the prince sculpted the imagery of his epoch, fully expressing the particular spirituality that animated it. Already in the 15th century, a new conception of mankind and the world had been developed through the rediscovery of the traditions of the Hellenistic and ancient worlds. Humanists such as Lorenzo Valla, Pico della Mirandola, and Marsilio Ficino gathered, studied, and once again translated texts by Aristotle and Plato, and produced majestic works. In the Italian courts, especially in Florence and Rome, Alexandrian texts on medicine, astronomy, mathematics, and geometry were collected and studied. These texts had been passed on to the Christian West by Byzantine and Arabic scholars. Cosimo de' Medici il Vecchio founded the Neoplatonic Academy in Florence, based on the teachings of the Byzantine Georgios Gemistos Plethon. He appointed Marsilio Ficino as its director.
Ficino infatti tende a riprendere un tema che era già presente anche questo in Giorgio Gemisto Platone, cioè l'idea di una...
In fact, Ficino revives a subject that Georgios Gemistos Plethon had already touched on, namely the idea of a great tradition that the wisdom of mankind did not originate in Greece but in the Orient, starting from, according to Gemistos, the Oracula Chaldaica, texts written by Chaldean priests and astrologers, probably Chaldean too.
Sacerdoti caldei e astrologi, probabilmente anche caldei, e che Ficino accetta. Secondo Gemisto, questi caldei...
Ficino agrees with this. According to Gemistos, the Chaldean texts, the Oracula Chaldaica, have served as an inspiration for some traditions of the Greek world. We know that they have given rise to Pythagorism, then to Platonism, and to its subsequent development. This, then, is the idea of a very ancient primary wisdom, preceding Christian revelations, that creates this tradition, and which has been transmitted this way by this lineage for centuries, even for millennia.
Precedente e indipendente dalla rivelazione cristiana, che ha creato questa tradizione che di secolo in secolo, addirittura di millenni, si è tramandata vero, attraverso questa strada, questa linea.
Thanks to the great thirst for knowledge driving the popes and the nobility at that time, texts were rediscovered that had a significant influence on the development of philosophy, science and art in the ensuing centuries, such as the Hieroglyphical and the Corpus Hermeticum by Hermes Trismegisto.
Ficino ci aggiunge.
Moreover, Ficino is interested in another writer, Hermes Trismegisto, Gemistos Plethon had not quoted him because Plethon was convinced that civilization and Egyptian knowledge depended fully on these texts belonging to the Mesopotamian tradition. So if Ficino creates this myth, recalls this myth, that will be his fundamental subject. The rebirth is the rebirth of this civilization, of this tradition of knowledge that was initiated in the ancient times.
In tempi antichissimi.
At the end of the 15th century, the book Hypnerotomachia Polyphili, better known as The Dream of Polyphilo, was published in Venice. It is an allegorical synthesis of the humanistic conception of the world, almost a manifesto for the Renaissance humanism. A new and extraordinary conception of the world was being born within a revolutionary atmosphere. The 16th century opens to this explosive panorama, while the revolution spreads into all cultural and scientific fields. In 1543, the Polish astronomer Nicholas Copernicus publishes the heliocentric theory based on the studies of the Alexandrian scientist Aristarchus of Samos. In 1584, Giordano Bruno takes a stand for heliocentrism, also affirming the infinity of the universe and the presence of life in other worlds. Based on these studies, Galileo, Kepler and Newton continue the research, laying the foundations of modern astronomy. Natural sciences advance by great bounds, largely surpassing the masters of the past and intensifying the production of illustrated, printed scientific books. The works of medicine, anatomy, geometry, chemistry, music, mathematics and botany that were printed between 1502 and 1589 continue to be fundamental texts today. New geographical discoveries and important inventions, like that of the compass, enabled great navigators to conceive of and undertake the most daring trips. In 1492, Christopher Columbus discovered the American coasts, followed subsequently by Vespucci, Cabral and the Caboto brothers. Vasco da Gama navigated the entire African coast, and between 1519 and 1522, Magellano from Portugal circumnavigated the globe.
Le scoperte geografiche hanno cambiato l'aspetto del mondo.
The geographical discoveries have changed the image of the world, just as the return of the classical traditions had changed the face of history by kindling an interest in ancient traditions, further back than Greece, right to the Oriental world, along with rediscovery of other civilizations. So the geographical discoveries broadened and completely transformed the vision of the world.
Le scoperte geografiche allargano e trasformano completamente la visione del mondo.
16th century man finds himself at the center of the cosmos, master of himself and creator of infinite worlds. Lost and afraid, yet aware of his fundamental role, he tries to reconcile the sacred with the profane and the divine with the terrestrial. After the fragmentation of the Christian world and of the cosmological understanding, space is no longer a coherent system which is rationally and geometrically organized. Nature, metamorphic, alive, unstable, and eternally changing, is also the mother of monsters. The monstrous pervades the imaginary, while man tries to gain possession of the secrets of matter.
L'intervento sulla natura è un misto, fatto salvo naturalmente la razionalità che interviene a modellare questa stessa natura, è un misto di...
Intervening in nature is a mixture, except in the case of rationality which intervenes to shape this same nature. It is a mixture of intended order and the capability to marvel, because reason can make the marvel emerge in all its potency, in all its extraordinary numinous value. In the numinous, that is, in the divine, lies the concept of the portentous, the portent. Wonderment is part of all the ancient cultures, and it constitutes an essential element of the encounter between man and the divine. The divine, that is portentous, that is marvellous, that is extraordinary, and that is monstrous. Monstrum is what is marvellous because the divinities, the gods, only work through the potency that is exclusive to them, manifesting themselves through the prodigies, signa, and phenomena that are not human.
Non fanno altro che, per la loro stessa potenza, che manifestarsi attraverso dei prodigi, attraverso dei signa, dei fenomeni che non sono umani.
Mannerism, through its several artistic and literary forms, becomes the vehicle of this revolution throughout Europe. The Mannerist artist does not imitate nature, but creates, and this creative act makes him resemble the gods. The work itself is the manifestation of the divine in the soul of the artist. Gardens become a theatre for allegory, places different from reality, spaces containing sequences and images. They are an illustrated symbolic text where fantastic architecture and monsters appear, as in Bomarzo.
El jardín de Bomarzo es un espacio narrativo, en donde van apareciendo distintas escenas y episodios.
The Garden of Bomarzo is a narrative space in which different scenes and episodes appear. It is also a garden that, in this sense, is almost the quintessence of mannerism, that is, the taste for the shocking and the paradoxical. Whereas in the Renaissance garden, everything is proportionate and harmonious. In Bomarzo, for example, a turtle appears that is larger than a horse. There is a tower with a square base that expresses stability, but that nevertheless is completely tilted. This taste for the shocking and the paradoxical responds to the new aesthetic, the aesthetic of mannerism. Comparing it to the Renaissance garden, which is a garden of light and open space, this is a garden which plays a lot with the contrast of light and shade. Water also appears in its natural state, a stream with cascades and fountains too. When going through the garden, the impression is not that of serenity and stability, as in the Renaissance garden, but rather there is a contrast, a dynamic sweep that makes an impression on the visitor.
Que acaba produciendo una impresión en el visitante.
This was perhaps exactly the wish of Prince Orsini, expressed in an inscription that is also an invitation. You who goes round the world looking for great and wonderful marvels, come here, where there are horrid faces, elephants, bears, ogres, and dragons.
Vicino Orsini wanted to express a philosophical itinerary in his garden. He wished to revive the classical tradition of the sacred wood as a place of initiation.
Como lugar de iniciación.
The sacred wood is inhabited by images that are signs of another world, a dreamy and almost extraterrestrial world, where the feeling of wonderment is mixed with the feeling of the terrible, almost as in dreams, which suppress daily associations in order to establish a different relationship between objects.
Secondo la trattatistica onirocritica, cioè secondo la trattatistica che riguarda i sogni.
According to the Onirocritic treatise, that is, according to the books that deal with dreams in the ancient world, the dream is the most appropriate tool with which to contact the divine. We can also contact the divine whilst awake. However, the dream facilitates this type of exercise. This accords with Senecio, Artemidoro, and the great written traditions that deal with dreams. Why does it facilitate it? For the simple reason that when the body sleeps, the senses sleep too, and sensitivity to the bodily limitations dissolves, thereby liberating the noetic parts, the most noble parts of the mind, the soul, the spirit. These are the different subtle parts of man. Without the interference of body weight, they can take off and then ascend to make contact with ideal forms.
L'aggravio e il peso corporale possono innalzarsi e quindi ascendere a contattare delle forme ideali.
In the Bomarzo garden, extraordinary encounters take place with giants, ogres and sphinxes, and also with Pegasus, Venus, and the whole kingdom of Pluto, the dragon keepers and the sea monsters, in an alternating recall that always alludes to fantastic or supernatural places. The same places where 15th century man opens the way into the world and his own conscience. The presence of water in the woods, now almost disappeared, is essential to symbolize the primordial life force. An artificial lake fed the fountains of the nymphs and those of Pegasus, Venus, and Pluto. In the fountain dedicated to Venus, originally protected by a grotto, water inundated the goddess and gushed from her navel to fall into the vessels beneath her in the shape of a dragon or seashell. Since the 15th century, Venus is found represented in a lot of paintings, sculptures, frescoes and monuments of villas and palaces. The previously mentioned Hypnerotomachia Polyphili is a journey that leads precisely to the abode of Venus, the lady of the marvelous and perfect garden.
Comunque Venere è un tema estremamente affascinante e molto importante.
Venus is an extremely fascinating and very important theme. Because, as Pico della Mirandola explains, it is beauty, it is decorum. How was the world created? This is the problem. How is the world created out of a chaotic situation? From a situation of disorder, where there is not yet order, the conception of the shapelessness, of primordial chaos, of primordial disorder. How does it become order? Naturally, it becomes order through divine intervention. Therefore, Pico says, recalling the teaching of Hesiodo, we have the genitals of Uranus. Uranus evirates himself. He cuts off his genitals, and there is therefore a separation from the sexual element. The genitals fall into the water, which is the shapeless element, the chaotic element, and genus of Venus. Thus from the waters that are shapeless matter, beauty is born. Venus becomes, through this intervention, the union between the genitals and the semen of Uranus, of the sky and the life-giving aqueous element. Beauty is born, as is decorum. Because decorum requires that every part is commensurable to the other, and everything contributes to give harmony to the whole. This type of harmony, that conjugates the smallest element with the universality of all the assembled elements, and expresses the continuous synthesis, the continuous communion between all the parts, this is decorum. The decorum is beauty, the beauty in Venus, this is Venus. This is why the myth of Venus exists, and Venus becomes a high moment of thought for the Florentine Neoplatonics, and later for European culture, because the Renaissance, the Italian Renaissance, fertilizes the whole of Europe.
Poi europea, perché il Rinascimento feconda tutta l'Europa, il Rinascimento italiano.
As we have been able to observe, the Bomarzo wood, together with many of the 15th century works, allow us to understand plastically what in reality was happening in the mind of Western man at that time. The art of the sacred wood fully expresses the revolutionary way of conceiving space and time, the coexistence between the gods and the infernos, between myths and nature, subvert the fixed and unchangeable relationships of the ancient world, and open up new possibilities in human evolution. As a result of overcoming the limitations of the narrow-minded medieval consciousness, a new leap forward has been prepared by the courage of many men and women, together with the contribution of the Hellenistic, Arab and Byzantine cultures. The indomitable push towards knowledge and the search for new and more profound answers in a world that had opened itself for the first time to infinity allowed humanity once again to travel along a new path, illuminating a future which has reached us. I rise fearless to cleave through the immensity of space with my wings, not allowing prejudice to deter me in front of the celestial spheres, whose existence was wrongly deduced from a false principle, so that it would be as though we were confined in a fictitious jail, and that everything would be constrained within unbreachable walls. But for me, better is the mind that has completely dispersed those clouds.